Welcome to today's webinar. A copy of today's handout is available from your menu bar. Good morning. This is Annette Thacker-Bartlett with the Office of the State Superintendent of Education with the Division of Teaching and Learning. I'm joined today by some of my colleagues from the Division of Teaching and Learning as well as the Division of K-12 Systems and Supports who will be on the line to answer your questions as we go throughout the webinar. Today is Wednesday, January 17th. 2018, and this is the monthly LEA Special Education Point of Contact webinar. Today's webinar will be pretty brief, leaving lots of time for questions at the end. We are going to do a very brief overview of child find and initial evaluation, as well as introduce to you the training plan for this year. Many of you have already signed up for the training, but for those of you who have not or have not yet chosen a representative to go from your LEA, I will be reminding you of how to register for that, as well as a sneak preview of what we will cover in that training. And we will finish up this webinar with reminders and announcements. At any time today, if you have questions, please type them into the question chat box in your menu bar. All right, let's start with a brief overview and reminder of what child find is, as well as an overview of initial evaluation and how that's going to change later this year. Officially, child find is a continuous process of public awareness activities, screening, and evaluation designed to locate, identify, and evaluate children who may require early intervention or special education services. So let's just stop for a minute and break this down. We say the phrase child find. That phrase actually comes from IDEA, from the federal laws that govern special education in our nation. The three key words here that I want to point out are the words locate, identify, and evaluate. So child find is actually a pretty broad process, and within the child find process lies the initial evaluation process, which is a little more structured and formalized and has a lot of documentation requirements that go with it, as you know, as you are the one that is probably pretty heavily involved in either conducting or overseeing the conducting of initial evaluations at your LEA and school campuses. Child find it starts before you actually do an initial evaluation, however. It can mean a lot of different things, including public awareness and including screening. Let's look at what the exact language is from the local regulations, from the DC municipal regulations. In the section that talks about FAPE, which is free and appropriate public education, it says specifically that the LEA shall ensure that procedures are implemented to, and here we see those three key words again, identify, locate, and evaluate all children with disabilities residing in the district who are in need of special education and related services, including children with disabilities attending private school, regardless of the nature or severity of their disabilities. I do want to point out, let me go back just one slide where it says early intervention or special education services. I forgot to clarify here. For those of you who are not familiar with early intervention, that's talking about services for infants and toddlers who qualify under the IDEA. It's not called special education because those children are not yet of school age. And then once those children turn age 3, then they enter the world of special education. But prior to that, when they are infants and toddlers, it is called early intervention. And there is an entire child find process that goes with that as well for infants and toddlers. But that is not part of your responsibility as the LEA. For infants and toddlers, that responsibility lies with the state. So there is a whole team at OSSE that focuses on child find for those infants and toddlers. So here we see that in the law, and I didn't show the part of the law that also talks about the state's responsibility. There is a lot of responsibility that lies on the state to make sure that child find is happening, but also at the LEA level to make sure that child find is happening. The U.S. Department of Education has within it the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, as sometimes we refer to them. And several years ago, they came up with a list of what they felt were the keys to an effective child find system. And these keys here are part of what our larger in-person training will be focusing on, but I wanted to highlight them here for you today. As I mentioned before, Child Find is a very broad process that has many components to it, and your LEA must ensure that it has a robust system in place to be able to successfully locate, identify, and evaluate those children who are in need of special education. So here are some keys, just generally, that you can kind of use as a checklist when you're thinking about the Child Find system you have in place at your LEA. First of all, you need to have an LEA level policy that is written and officially adopted at your LEA. One of the things that we're going to do for you when you come to the in-person Child Find training is provide for you a model LEA Child Find policy, almost like a template that you could use and adopt it for your own LEA's policy if you so choose. Secondly, providing professional development to your staff is key. Child Find deals with students that are not yet in special education, so you cannot rely simply on ensuring that you have really good special educators or those serving students with those that are serving students already identified as having disabilities. You cannot rely on just their level of expertise. You need to make sure that all of your staff who work with students in the general education setting have the professional development they need to be able to identify and flag for your school any students that actually might need to be evaluated. And part of this includes engaging in public awareness activities with partners. This can include public awareness for other community groups or after-school programs, any population that works with your students that might be a source of referral or a source of information if that student does go through the initial evaluation process. In particular, parents and families, letting them know that a referral process does exist in the case that they suspect that their student has a disability. And also conducting school-wide screenings. If you do not have a good screener system in place, then you will not be as effective in identifying those students who may need to be evaluated for special education. I know here at OSSE we offer a number of professional development trainings that can help you think about these systems that are in place outside of the special education world, such as response to intervention and student support team processes, things like that, where you're collecting data and looking at students both school-wide or at the individual level to collect information, which can then lead to possible Child Find referrals. And then when those referrals are made, making sure that they are done appropriately and timely, that you get that initial evaluation process up and running in a timely manner and that it's closed out in a timely manner. And in a few minutes here, we'll look at the new timeline that will be put into place later this year once the new timeline for initial evaluation goes into effect. Also, maintain and report accurate data and use it to inform training needs. Collecting that data, again, that all ties in together with what you're doing with your screenings and your response to intervention and your student support team processes, information, data that you're collecting on students both in the aggregate and at the individual level can help inform how you prepare your staff to ensure that you are identifying all children that are in need of special education. And coordinating with other agencies as appropriate. If your LEA works closely with other agencies or organizations who work directly with your students, who may have information on your students who may be a really good direct source of information on your students, coordinating with them so that they are aware of your referral process and about the initial evaluation process is also a key to an effective Child Find system. And speaking of referral, here I have for you pretty basic flow chart. This makes it look really simple. We all know that this is not always a simple process, but this graphic was created to help you understand the changes that are about to go into effect later this year. OSSE still fully anticipates that the new timeline will go into effect as of July 1st of this year. So in just 5.5 months from today. And hopefully your LEA is already making plans for that. During our in-person training, we will have the opportunity to dive deeper into this and talk about how we can be better prepared for this shorter timeline. But just as a general overview, as a reminder, right now, under the DC law, the timeline from referral is 120 calendar days from the date the referral is made until you have to have an eligibility determination made. And within that timeline, right now the law is not specific about when parental consent has to be obtained within that timeline. It is a step along the way if you are choosing to move forward with doing a full evaluation. What will change is the evaluation timeline will go to 60 days. However, I know some of you are thinking, well, 60 days, that's half of 120 days. But it's not actually cutting the timeline in half. It's actually just dicing up the timeline in a slightly different way. So from the date of referral until you obtain parental consent is 30 calendar days. So within those 30 calendar days, you as the LEA should be making reasonable attempts to gain parental consent. And we all know that there are times when getting that parental consent is not possible, despite your best efforts. But you do need to make those reasonable efforts. And what that looks like, we will dig deeper into in our in-person training as to what your due diligence is as the LEA, that reasonable efforts to gain that parental consent if this child is a child who does need to be fully evaluated to determine if they qualify for special education. The 60-day timeline that you're hearing a lot about, 60 days, this actually starts on the date that parental consent is received. That's when the clock starts ticking for the 60 days. And then from there, you have 60 days, calendar days, to look at the data. You already have to go gather additional data if needed. In some cases, additional formal assessments are needed. And in other cases, the data you have, the existing data you have on the student is such that you do not need additional formal assessments. It's all very individualized for each student. It just depends on what data you already have on that student and what areas of concern you have for the student. And that eligibility determination needs to be made within 60 calendar days of parental consent. And as you know, this process is heavily documented in the SEDS system. We will also make sure in our in-person training that we connect the dots to the SEDS system and making sure that you know what and how to document those things in SEDS along the way. Another major topic that always comes up when we talk about child find is response to intervention, or RTI, as we like to call it. Some people think that if response to intervention, if a student is involved in the response to intervention process, then you do not need to do child find, that you do not need to evaluate them, but rather just kind of like wait and see how RTI, what the result is of the interventions, but that's not correct. Child find and RTI can actually coexist and should coexist for those students. You cannot delay doing a referral for an initial evaluation if there is data to suggest that a student may need special education. Simply because you're doing the response to intervention process is not an excuse to delay making that referral for child find if that's what the data is pointing to. You can continue to implement response to intervention even while the initial evaluation is going on. In fact, trying different interventions and documenting how the student responds to those interventions, that is really great data that's actually very helpful during the initial evaluation process. So to have that existing data already that you can analyze and to continue to collect that data throughout the timeline is great. You should not delay a referral just because RTI is happening. And again, nothing about referrals or RTI or child find, nothing about it is black and white. It doesn't look the same for every student. It is individualized for each student. But if there is a reason to suspect a student has a disability, a referral does need to be made, and you need to move forward with that initial evaluation. And maybe you don't get that far. Maybe after you analyze existing data, then it's obvious that there is not a disability, and you can close out the evaluation process at that point with the prior written notice and the correct documentation. Or maybe you decide to move forward and continue to do a full evaluation. There's different paths that each case can take. It all depends on the student. Now, when it comes to referrals, sometimes people mistakenly believe that a parent is the only person that can make a referral, and that is not true. Referrals can come from many different sources, from teachers and school staff, from other people that know the student directly. Of course, you do want to get the parent involved because their consent will be needed at some point to be able to continue with an evaluation process. But schools who suspect that a student may need special education should not sit around and wait for a parent to make that referral. They should move forward and act. So that is a very brief overview of child find as well as initial evaluation and how those fit together. During the upcoming trainings that you have heard about and that most of you have already signed up for, we will be doing a much deeper dive into child find and initial evaluation. We will review in depth all of the procedural requirements that have to do with initial evaluation, including how the law is going to change later this year. We are also going to take a look at the child find process and what that can look like in your LEA and how you can strengthen that process. And we are also going to take a very small amount of time in the training to talk about a recent Supreme Court case decision that does affect how an IEP team, it affects the nature of the IEP when you're developing the IEP after a student has gone through the initial evaluation process. So we will take the time to discuss that a little bit as well. And during this training, we're going to make sure you walk away with a lot of great resources, including a presentation that you can take back and deliver to your own staff on child find and initial evaluation. So we'll give you, we'll make it easy for you to go and turn around and go train your own staff, as well as we'll give you guidance on that new Supreme Court decision. And as I mentioned before, a model LEA child find policy, as well as a brochure that you can share with parents to help them understand some of these new changes and to understand existing things that are also important for parents to know. If you have not yet registered for the training, I want to remind you that this training is required for all LEAs. As of last night, I am very pleased to announce that 55 of our 67 LEAs in the district have already registered at least one person. So excellent job, everyone, on signing up for these trainings. Many of you listening today, I know, are already registered for one of these trainings, so thank you for signing up so quickly. If you are from an LEA that has not yet signed up the right people, please take a moment today to register. You can click on this link here. It also is announced in the Look Forward for the last few weeks. The first couple sessions, I believe, are sold out. However, there might be a couple, I did notice a couple of registrations that were duplicate registrations, so I'll be canceling some of the duplicate registrations later today. So there might be a few openings popping up. If there's a day that you absolutely can't, if you can't attend one of the opening days and need to come to another day, but it's full, please send me an email, reach out. We might be able to just squeeze you in anyway, especially if you're a very busy LEA special ed point of contact and have only certain availability. Please send me an email. We'll see what we can do. And we are excited to see you in this training. It's going to be very interactive. Some of the leadership here at OSSE will be there to help deliver the training. We will be doing activities such as tabletop discussions, self-assessment, a World Cafe brainstorm, I know, very exciting, and a gallery walk. So all of this is to help prepare you to go back to your LEA and train your staff and implement a robust child find process that is effective at identifying and evaluating those students who do need to be in special ed. And again, you will walk away from the training with a presentation that you can take back to give to your staff, a model policy, an FAQ document about that recent Supreme Court decision, a brochure to share with parents, and there will be a SEDS user manual, just a little short user guide on the parts of SEDS that connect to Child Find and initial evaluation. So sign up today if you haven't already, and we are looking forward to seeing many of you later this month or in February. I'm going to finish today's webinar with some reminders and announcements. We've had a couple really good questions come in the chat box, and we're going to address those to the audience after these reminders and announcements. So stay on the line, those of you that have put in some really good questions, and we will answer those right after these announcements. So hopefully you've already heard about this. We've been talking about this for several months now, that there is a change coming up in non-public payments. But let me just back up for a second. Let me just remind you that those of you that have students at non-public programs, as the LEA, you are still expected to keep pretty tight oversight of what's happening to those students while they attend non-public programs, because they still belong to you as the LEA. They are still enrolled in your LEA, and you still have the ultimate responsibility for them and what happens to them with regards to IEP implementation and delivering services. And while you're overseeing what's going on with those students at non-publics, please also make sure that those non-public staff are using SEDS correctly, including creating service logs and generating service trackers in SEDS on a regular basis. And I'm reminding you of this because effective this month, there is a heightened requirement here at OSSE in the non-public payment world. Non-public payments and the invoicing team, they are requiring that service trackers are generated in SEDS for all related service sessions. Now, service trackers, you don't have to do a separate service tracker for every single service log. You can do a service tracker that covers an entire month or an entire week of service logs all combined together in one service tracker. There just has to be record of that service and that service log somewhere on a tracker in SEDS. So you need to check in with your non-publics, just make sure that they're doing okay using SEDS, that they're keeping up with the service logs and keeping up with generating a service tracker, which is different than a service log. Non-publics who may not have been paying as close attention to this before, all of a sudden may be paying very close attention because it is now tied even more closely to them getting paid by OSSE. So you might see an increase in the amount of support non-publics are asking for when it comes to getting access to those students in SEDS. Hopefully they are coming to you when they have issues accessing your students in SEDS. You as the LEA SEPOC have the ability in SEDS to modify a user's profile. This includes all non-public users. Even though you are not the one creating a SEDS account for non-public staff, you are the one that modifies a non-public user's profile to allow them to access students from your LEA that attend their campus. And we've gone over this in past webinars multiple times. If you need a refresher on this, I believe the December webinar and another webinar last fall went into greater detail about how you can troubleshoot if there are access issues for non-public staff in accessing your students in SEDS. There's also a guide online that we have posted to help with that. So OSSE is asking LEAs to support this enhanced non-public payment requirement by ensuring that non-public staff have access to OSSE systems, in particular SEDS. There's also SEATS and Squire, which one is for non-public staff. It's a database they have to use, and one is for non-public attendance. SEATS and Squire are two databases that you don't ever have to use yourself, but just know that the non-publics have to be using those. We ask that you are conducting SEDS service monitoring reviews, however you choose to do that. There is the Click RSMR, and there are other ways to oversee what's going on at non-publics with regards to service delivery. And if you notice that a non-public is not creating service logs and generating service trackers in the manner that they should be, you do need to be reaching out to those non-publics and saying, hey, what's going on? Where is the documentation and SEDS for the services you're providing to my student? If you have questions about this enhanced requirement for payment, meaning questions about OSSE's change and becoming more strict in requiring those service trackers for non-public payment, you can reach out to Yvonne Smith. Her contact information is here. And I just want to remind you, this is not a new requirement to do in SEDS. We are not asking non-publics to do anything new in SEDS. They should have already been doing service trackers all along. What's new is that we're now just tying that directly to them getting paid by OSSE. So generating service trackers in SEDS, again, that is not a new requirement. We are just re-emphasizing that it is an existing requirement and asking for your help to do so. And as a reminder, I've shared these in past webinars, but this is a reminder of resources that are available for non-publics, in particular for service providers at non-publics who may struggle to know how to do a service log correctly, or who may be a little bit clueless about the difference between a service log and a service tracker. There is a webinar training with a live demonstration. There's a step-by-step user guide with pictures, and there's the SEDS Basic User Guide Manual. And these are all posted here on this website. So if non-publics seem to be struggling, you can send them along these resources, and hopefully that will help get them started. Here are additional resources. Like I mentioned before, there's two other database systems. One is called Squire and one is called Seats. You don't use them, but non-publics do use them. They have to do with attendance and staff information. There's also a webinar tutorial on how to use those database systems. You don't need to teach them yourself, but if they are struggling with using those, you can definitely refer them to this resource. And I know it's not the springtime yet, especially when we look at the 2 inches of snow on the ground this morning, but PARCC and Next Generation Science and all of those statewide assessments are just around the corner, coming this spring. This is just a reminder that the new Accommodations Manual from PARCC has been updated and is available online. This was released, I believe, last November, but I just want to remind you, make you aware in case you didn't know, that this manual, the most recent version of the manual, is available. If you have any questions at all about accommodations, accessibility features, about registering your students for the statewide assessments, about the alternate assessment eligibility review and appeals, any of that, you can contact Michael Craig on the assessment team, and his contact information is here. And as a reminder, you should be reading the LEA Look Forward newsletter every Wednesday. Hopefully it's coming straight to your inbox. If you're not getting it in your inbox, here's information on how you can subscribe. And you don't even have to subscribe to go read it. All newsletters are posted automatically on OSSE's homepage. If you go to the homepage and you scroll down a little bit, you can see a tab for newsletters, and you can get access to all of the recent newsletters. And in each weekly newsletter, there is a special section focused on professional development and what's coming up soon. Anything that's a new announcement, if there's a training that is newly announced, it will be advertised in this PD section of the newsletter for 2 weeks in a row. And then after that, it is bumped down under the Dates to Remember section. So if your staff is wondering what opportunities are coming up, you can send them here to the Look Forward to look at what's coming up soon. And speaking of which, we do have a lot of professional development around restorative practices. So if you're looking for some training on that to get your school more involved in building this positive culture and climate in your school, there are some good trainings coming up, as well as the monthly community of practice. You can jump in at any time to that monthly community of practice. You don't have to go to every single month. You can just jump in whenever you want. There is a different topic topic of focus each month. You can read more about that by clicking the link here. And last but not least, OSSE has moved. As of yesterday, we are in a brand new building, just 2 blocks up the street from where we used to be. So if you're planning to come to OSSE anytime soon, whether it's for a meeting or a training, or if you're going to mail something to us, please know that we have moved 2 blocks up the street. All of our phone numbers have stayed the same. Our emails are the same, just our address has changed. So just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay, and now we're going to pause and take a look at the questions in the chat box. So I'm going to turn off my microphone for just 1 minute, and then we'll be back online with some Q&A from the questions you typed into the chat box.
Hold on.
All right, just give us 1 more minute. We're reading through the questions. Stay on the line. We'll be right back with the answers to your questions. All right, we've got some great questions that have come in. Some of you that serve as a special ed POC more at a school campus level, not at the overall LEA level, have been asking whether or not you're required to come to the child find training. And that is up to your LEA central office administration. OSSE has set the requirement that each LEA needs to be represented at the training, but what that looks like down at your school campus level, that is up to your LEA. That is up to your LEA special ed POC. So for example, DCPS central office, there are a couple people at the central office at DCPS who serve as the main LEA special ed POC, overseeing everything. And I know that they have signed up to come to the training. Whether or not they want campus level people, that's up to them. So same goes for you from charter schools that have a lot of different campuses. Who comes to the child find training? That needs to be worked out with your top central office administration of who will come to the training. And then remember, at the training here at OSSE, it's kind of like a train the trainer, because then we will give you resources to turn around and go train your staff back at your LEAs and campuses. We also have had a question about the timeline for initial evaluation. Someone said that they have already been following a 90-day timeline instead of a 120-day timeline. It is always the case that if your LEA decides to do a shorter timeline than what is required by law, that is definitely your option as an LEA. If you want to do a shorter timeline, a shorter turnaround, that's great. As long as you're meeting the state level timeline and requirements and doing everything appropriately, it is fine to have a faster timeline. When we do switch to the 60-day timeline, then everyone will need to follow that timeline. And again, that's 60 days from date of parental consent all the way until the eligibility determination decision is made. We've had some good questions come in about the date of consent. What date starts the timeline? Is it the date that the parent actually signs the paper giving consent, or the date that that piece of paper finds its way over to your school? And the answer is it's from the date that the parent signed the consent. So if you have trouble with your parent communication to where a parent might be providing consent, but then you're not being made aware that they provided that consent, for if there's a big lag of time, then you'll want to figure out how to do more outreach with that parent for them to provide that consent in a timely manner. And again, in our training, our in-person training, we'll talk about reasonable efforts to work with the parent to get that consent in a timely manner. So the clock does start ticking that 60 days from the date that the parent actually signs the consent form. And yes, you do have to put that consent form back into SEDS, but you do have extra time to do that. But the clock starts ticking from the date that it is signed. Some of you have questions about... Right. Another good question has come in about what happens if a referral and signed consent to evaluate happen on the same day. That's great. Then the clock starts ticking, that 60-day clock starts ticking from that same day. I guess you don't need 30 days to get the consent between the time of referral and consent. I guess let me back up. So under the current timeline of 120 days, if referral and signed parental consent happen on the same day, then that day is the day that starts the 120-day timeline. Under the new law, that will start the 60-day timeline because you have that signed consent to evaluate, and so then that starts the clock for 60 days. Someone is asking how to sign up for the in-person child find trainings and all professional development. You should be receiving the LEA Look Forward each Wednesday in your email inbox. And let me just go back to that slide. Here's the slide that shows you how to subscribe to the LEA Look Forward so that you get it in your inbox every Wednesday. But even if you are not subscribed, you can go and view the LEA Look Forward newsletter at any time from the OSSE homepage using these instructions, this website here. So, for example, last week's Look Forward, here's a little screenshot of the section on upcoming professional development opportunities. And these are all hyperlinked. If you click on any of, when you're looking in the newsletter, this section has a bunch of hyperlinks. And if you click on any of them, it takes you directly to the registration page. So we've had some good questions coming in about with regards to the timeline changing down to 60 days in July. Does OSSE have plans to change some of its reports? For example, the LEA Performance and Planning Report to account for the new initial eval timeline. Yes, generally speaking, OSSE is going to be changing a lot of things. As you know, we're going to have to make changes to SEDS, and as a result of that, there will be changes to any data or reports that relies on information from SEDS, that pulls information from SEDS. So there will be a lot of changes, and I know OSSE's data team has already started mapping out those changes. So yes, there will be changes. As July 1st gets closer and closer, I will be sure to include information about these updates and changes, things coming down the pipe. I will be sure to highlight those in the monthly webinar as they become ready and available. So you can definitely expect to see more information coming out of OSSE about how SEDS is going to change and reports and things like that in anticipation of that timeline change July 1st. Some of you have asked some really great questions, but they are very specific to your situation or about a certain student. So the OSSE team here, we're going to stay on the line and continue to answer those more personalized questions one-on-one with you in the chat box. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the overall webinar for everybody. Would like to thank you for coming today. Next month, we will be talking about discipline for students with disabilities. So we look forward to seeing you then, and we look forward to seeing many of you at the upcoming Child Find trainings. Thank you so much for your participation today, and stay warm out there with all that snow.